Tell me when. Now. All right, good evening, everyone. We're about to get started. Our guest speaker for the evening has arrived. For those of you joining us online, I apologize for the delay. There was some issues with the speaker and his escort here, but he has now arrived and is in the building, and we will be starting in a few minutes. Derek. Guys, I'm just trying to see what I can do about the trying to come up with the air conditioning a bit. I appreciate that. Press it up. And as you can see, I'm shivering. I'm shivering in your face. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposition leader for the government of Jamaica. I want to introduce to Vincent and Vinci, right? Vinci man. And the animal is
everybody.
All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to get the program started. Once again, for those of you joining us live via stream and YouTube, we do apologize for the delay in getting started with the stream. But we are on now. All right, so my name is Dr. Ken Irish Bramble, and I'm the Executive Director of the Caribbean Research Center here at McAllen College. I'm going to keep because we are working within a restricted time frame, I will keep my remarks relatively short. Caribbean Research Center was founded in 1935, and as such is one of the City University of New York's oldest centers. We were formed with a focus and a mission to highlight and to study through interdisciplinary collaboration both in academic departments and community organizations and organizations throughout the diaspora, the study of the Caribbean diaspora. Over the years, we have expanded that mission, and we have run community programs. We have published several books. We published one of the university's few refereed journals, newsletters, and of course, we sponsor events such as this, where we bring speakers of this distinguished level to share their thoughts, not only with the college community, but with the larger community, in order to better educate people around the world about the experiences of Caribbean people and their influence and their significance around history. Tonight, we are honored to present to you remarks from Mr. Mark Golding, Member of Parliament and Leader of the Opposition. And joining him this evening is Ms. Lisa Hanna, who's also a Member of Parliament and Minister, Opposition Representative in charge of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Did I get that correct? Yeah. Or close to it? All right, fair enough. All right. First, I'm going to ask you all to rise for the playing of the Jamaican national anthem.
Because we from the
Before we get, before we push forward into the rest of the program, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the presence of several dignitaries. Present today is Dr. Karen Dunkley, who is the Jamaican Global Diaspora Council representative for the Northeast of the United States. Juan and Dennis Wallen Esquire, Union of Jamaican Alumni Association. Dr. Michael Wilshire, who is the principal of the Medgar College Preparatory School, forgive me. Dr. Gerald White Davis, who is representing the consortium of Caribbean professionals. Dr. Zulima Blair, I think I saw pop in. Hey, there you are, Dr. Blair. And Dr. Blair is the chair of our department of our public administration department. And she's also the interim director of the Ralph Bunche Du Bois Center. Dr. Ethan Gallagher, who is the dean of the School of Liberal Arts. Ms. Zanalaya Rose, I apologize, did I get that right? Jamila. Oh, I am so sorry. Ms. Jamila Rose, and Ms. Jamila Rose is the Deputy Public Advocate of Civic and Community Empowerment. Is that correct? All right, closing. I apologize for London during the day. And of course, last but not least, a lady who needs very little introduction, a woman who was pivotal in the growth and development of the Caribbean Research Center of this college, Medgar Evers, representative of our community who has served us in government and city council, who has become synonymous with advocacy on the part of Caribbean Americans in New York. Is now currently a trustee at the City University of New York, none other than Miss Una Clark. This time I'd actually like to invite Clark to join us on stage to bring us welcoming remarks on behalf of the university. Ladies and gentlemen, Trustee Clark.
My fellow Jamaicans and Caribbean Americans in particular, we are a mixed group here tonight because I don't let the other islands off the hook. We don't want Jamaica carry the road for everybody, so we make sure they carry their own load. But let me, on behalf of the City University of New York, welcome all of you to Medgar Evers College. And you may want to know that I am one of the founders of this institution called Medgar Evers College. Warriors, when our people came with their, as nurses, doctors, lawyers, they were told, we can't take you in until you show us a degree. If they do A, B, and C, and we do 185, whatever, we grade it differently. But that doesn't mean you're not a graduate. And so we had to really get in the streets and act up in the 60s to get this place big. Medgar Evers is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. I have lived in the United States for 65 years before all of you were born. Oh my God. All of you were born, and I want you to know that I have one foot here and one foot in Jamaica right now. Yes. I've already done 80% of my life in the United States. I'm taking the other 20% back in Jamaica. There is nothing wrong with Appleton, Silo, Taunton, St. Elizabeth. St. Elizabeth is the best college in the island. And you think of that the rest of the year. I know I was gonna start a riot here, but who feed you up? But who feed you up? I come from the bread basket. And then my dad is born in Wachovia, South St. Elizabeth, and my mother is born in Taunton. My mother is an authentic maroon from a compound town. So when I run for public office, the first thing I told people, I said, all are gonna wanna know who I am. So I gave them my history. And that's why you don't see anything negative in the paper, but because I put it out there before they could ever go look it up and then mix up the story. So let me, on behalf of the institution, welcome all of you. Those of you who've never been to Medgar Evers before and you live in Brooklyn or in New York, please know that your children are welcome to be enrolled for very little money at any of the community colleges. You do your undergraduate work here, and then when you want the graduate work, Columbia is good, Harvard is good, Yale is good, City College is good, but don't strain your pocket. Don't strain your pocket, because these all 26 of these institutions within the City University of New York is A number one. A number one. So I just want to welcome all of you, and Mr. Party Leader, so good to see you. Yes! To those of you who are members of the People's National Party, I was born and raised in confusion. My father and me Bruce went to school together, and my father thought that labor and labor right was the same thing. So I went to Buxton High School in Kingston, and my aunt said to me, I know your father is confusing you. Don't listen to him. You got to be a member of the People's National Party. So I got my broom like at about age 12, and I would sweep them out. I did my sweeping out at that time. And I think it's time to get some broom again. So I am honored and privileged to welcome all of you and to say to the party leader and Ms. Hannah, I am up in Red Hills. And you come and get me, I know how to organize women. I know how to organize. I couldn't have gotten to the New York City Council unless I knew how to organize. And Mr. all these Serbian folks here know that I meant well for all of us. And that I made sure that the United States of America, where I've come to, is better off now than when I found it. So again, that is welcome all of you. Nobody loves Jamaicans more than I do.
Thank you, Trustee Clark. As always, you can count on you for some fiery and pointful remarks, and I join with you in endorsing the quality of education that's available here at the City University of New York, and particularly in a time period where people are complaining about being saddled with student loan debt and the cost of getting an education, which, as you rightly said, is the gateway into social mobility. But if the gateway comes with an anchor around your neck, then you have to question the choices that are offered to you in terms of ID. Certainly here at City University, we offer the past 10 years, we've seen an increase in students who are transferring from Ivy League schools for opting to take the opportunity to come to the City University over schools as prestigious as Princeton and Columbia. All right. At this point in time, I would like to invite to the stage the chair of the Caribbean Research Center Advisory Board, Bishop Rivetta Gonzalez, who is going to lead us in a brief prayer. Following by that, we will have some entertainment by some authentic Jamaican.
Thank you, Dr. Brambles. Wow!
Wow.
Look at Jamaicans. See them now. Okay. So this is a moment in time. And I think heaven understands that 60 years of us riding the ship in independence, we could not have done it without Almighty God. Amen. And it's this God that has brought us through storms, through our ups and downs, our valleys, our mountaintops, our rights and our wrongs, our weak and our strong. But tonight we know that somewhere out in the universe, there's a God who's looking down, a God of justice and a God of peace, a God of plenty, a God that has guided and directed us as a nation, and will continue to be with us. To our opposition leader, to our honorable Lisa, roads that will lead to another life, a better world, a bigger and better Jamaica for all of our people. So Almighty God tonight, take full control of our evening, of our opposition leader, of our nation, those who stand in the gap, those who are willing to walk forward and say, until change comes, until Jamaica is better, we will not rest in prayer, but honor to God and to all those who serve. So it is. So it is. To God be the glory. Yes, ma'am. Yes. We have run the race with patience, and you have put Jamaica on the map in America. And we want to thank God for you. 1 foot here and 1 foot there means nothing, for you are always from the rock. On the rock you will stand, and we will stand there with you. You changed America. Now you'll go back and build Jamaica. Amen.
Well done, well done.
Yes, sir.
This time, as I said, we're going to have a sole entertainment segment of tonight's program. And tonight, our entertainment is being brought to you by a New York-based group of Jamaican origin, producing their own creative presentation of Jamaican folk song and folk song interpretation. All right. So at this point in time, it's my pleasure to introduce the group Water.
Not that one. Wrong number.
I apologize. So I am host, DJ, director, and organizer tonight. So forgive me. I'm humble here and here, so I apologize. Apparently, I started it the wrong track. All right, here we go again. Let's try that one more time. Come we go down, come we go down, come we go down. I saw last walking, come we go down, come we go down. We go buy banana. Come we go down, come we go down, come we go down. I saw last walking, come we go down, come we go down. We go buy banana. Come we go down as soon as we go buy banana. Come we go buy one finger, we go bend upon it. Come we go down, come we go down, come we go down. And so that's walking. Come we go down, come we go down. We go buy banana. Say we go down as soon as we go buy banana. Take out the long check bag before he can grab it. Come we go down, come we go down, come we go down. And so that's walking. Come we go down, come we go down. We go buy banana. We go down as soon as and we have a banana. One chicken foot girl come from me. That's we try get to money. Come we go down, come we go down, come we go down. And so that's walking. Come we go down, go down. We go buy banana. Banana, banana, banana is nice and sweet. Banana, banana, banana is very, very cheap. Banana, 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 banana is nice and sweet. Banana, 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 banana is very, very cheap. Banana is very good to eat. Banana is very, very cheap. Ripe and green, banana green and ripe. Banana must be jam. Banana black and tan. Banana shiny banana. Banana honey banana. Banana ripe and green. Banana green and ripe. Banana rich one like it. Banana poor one like it. Banana come we go down, come we go down, come we go down. I saw us walking. Come we go down, come we go down. We go buy banana. Come we go down, come we go down, come we go down. I saw us walking. Come we go down, we go buy, we go buy, we go buy banana.
The Brother Folk Fairs, and what is so wonderful about Brother has been a family to me for the past 5 months. Is that Brother does not only feature singers from Jamaica but from all over the region, and even all across the United States. We have some members from other states who are part of our group. Wow. My name is Colette Ambo, and I am from the Native Isle of Dominica.
I'm Sebastian. I'm representing Cuba.
name is Christine and I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm representing the reggae capital of the world, Jamaica. I am Tifa and I'm from the beautiful Spice Isle, Grenada.
Andrew and Niaganani. Representing Jamaica.
So you know where Solas Market is?
Yeah, teach them a little. Tawara machisleen, go down there. Machisleen, go down there. Tawara machisleen, go down there. Tawara machisleen, go down there. Mildred Hattree, down the yard, them can't be at all. Them name is Control, suck me blood, shall fire, them can't be at all. Mildred Hattree, down the yard, them can't be at all. Them name is Control, suck me blood, shall fire, them can't be at all. Dawara machisleen, can't go down there. Dawara machisleen, don't go down there. Dawara machisleen, can't go down there. Dawara machisleen, don't go down there. I drove out with them trees on. She happy run go back a yard, but she must be a car. Dawara machisleen, can't go down there. Dawara machisleen, don't go down there. Don't go down there. Don't go down there. Don't go down there. I'm on prayer now. They might you. Dawara machisleen. All right, you all might know this next one. Before we go to this one, children. Yes. Ready, man. So maybe put a little reading too. Children. Yes, mama. Who they have you been to? Grandma. What did she give you? Where is my share? How can I reach it? Suppose I fall. Those manners. And who is the dog? All right, let's try another one. Mosquito one. Mosquito two. Mosquito two. Mosquito one. Mosquito two. Next baby that one. Baby that you don't see them when it came to job, and then we don't know the second part. So let me see. So apparently I have been representing to Jamaica. The ring game and such the like. So let me hear you sing the man. Baby that walk, baby that talk, baby that eat with a knife and fork. Baby that walk, baby that talk, baby that eat with a next boxer. I love coffee, I love tea, I love it. We have to go report in Jamaican Canada. We don't remember the culture. Let me see if we remember this one. When me roasting yellow yam, and me slice it in a two. How nice it will be. white, flower lovely. And the coconut, what a glorious day when we roast the yellow yam. King Mouse of God, the yellow yam. King Mouse of God, the food in your hand. How nice it will be that you roll in the and it's touched on its head part. Joy in the coconut. What a glorious day when we roast the yellow yam. And when you get shit, with this all that grill, and this all fish, and the coconut oil, and when you rock, and the cutie finger, you not the wonder of the jungle food. Yum, yum, give me the yellow yum, 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 me love the yellow yum, 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 give me the yellow yum, 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 me love the yellow yum. Some love the white yum, others love the red yum. You might love the yum, 'cause I love the yellow yum. Some love the white yam, others love the red yam. You might love the yam, but I love the yellow yam. Yam, yam, give me the yellow yam. Yam, yam, we love the yellow yam. Yam, yam, give me the yellow yam. Yam, yam, we love the yellow yam. You want a little more? Yeah. So we have two more items for you. And you want what brata mean? What does brata mean? More! Brata mean a little more. You must say plenty. You must say plenty. You walk with your belly today. So, so the work we're doing here in the diaspora as a cultural organization is really about the preservation and celebration of folk culture and keeping those traditions alive. But for us here in the diaspora that are not connected to the source, I'm always paraphrasing a well-known phrase by Marcus Garvey that says that people without the knowledge of its past is like a tree without roots. So we want to remain rooted and grounded to the source, and that's what this is all about, celebrating our culture. We can't forget Dr. the Honorable Louise Bennett Copeland. Always put this song in her honor. yourself at ease. Really evening time, work is over now, it's evening time. We'll walk on mountains, we'll walk on mountains, we'll walk on mountainside. Make people beautiful on the way. And sing dance and merry on the mountainside. Catch up the fire matter, as we move rub up the flowers there. Evening time, work is over now, it's evening time. They walk on mountain, they walk on mountain, they walk on mountainside. Make people beautiful on the way. And sing dance and merry on the mountainside. Make we eat and sing. Oh yes, dance and merry make we eat and sing, dance and merry on the mountain
All right, so there is a Jamaican tradition called dinky meeting. Anybody know about dinky meeting? We have some country people in the house. It's a song and dance combination. All right, St. Mary represent banana chips in the house. So, dinky meeting is a song and dance combination. Normally performed at wakes and funerals. The idea is to lift the spirit of the bereaved. Can I get a few volunteers to join us up here?
Fortunate thing is, you know, when my man's going you know, no much of a strike, but we have any other volunteers that want to join us? We have one more volunteer. What? China find a part. You're a soldier. All right, sir. China for your phone. Watch me here. What kind of part? China for your phone. Any more volunteers that come and see? You have fun on the front. Now the gentleman is joining us up here. All right, so these folks have nominated themselves to learn the dinky unit dance in the next 30 seconds. So we're going to teach you really quickly. Watch me.
So you're going to take the left foot. Watch me take the left foot if you can't find it. Over that side, yeah? And you're going to pulse. Just pulse nice and easy. Like that. With the right foot, kick it out like you have a little knee. Yeah. And then you just kick out like that. All right, so we're going to put them together now. Stomp. And then kick out. I didn't think with that, but you have to look at it. What's that? All right, so the next level is to go forward and back. Forward and back. And then if you're going to the next level, then you want to go around. All right? So that is it. Then I'm going to open your tongue for the show, Bruno. That's right. We want you to sing. So dinky minutes call and response. Yes. I'm going to sing something and you're going to echo me. The singers are going to demonstrate. So tell me which month the goat learn to call. Tell me which month the goat learn to call. That's what you're going to sing. Let's try that. Tell me which month the goat learn to call. Tell me which month the goat learn to call. They're telling us if you sing already, they are made. some students. One more time. We won't learn to call. Now we have a sing and dance together. Are you ready? Yes. Even if I'm music and it's a music man. Dance the dancers. Come on. Somebody said to me, last one. Tell which one the donkey young heart. Tell which one the donkey young heart. January, March, April, May, June, July. Yes, sir. Sing along with me, sing along with me. Take it home. Tell which one the donkey young heart. Tell which one the donkey young heart. January, February, March, April, May, June, July.
Nice, Mr. P. Nice, Mr. P.
So as it is Jamaica 60th, I must say happy 60th, everyone. And just like in every breath, we can't say Jamaica without saying Miss Lou, we can't say Jamaica without saying the Honorable Robert Nesta Marley, popularly known as Bob Marley. So let me end the set with this song. Lighting up yourself. Lighting up yourself. Lighting up yourself. I don't need no drink. Lighting up yourself. Already is another bag. Lighting up yourself. And don't say no. Lighting up yourself. Cause I say so. You rock so, you rock so. Rock like you never did before. You did so, you did so. I'm gonna give through my door. You come so, you come so. Oh yeah, yeah. You scan so, you scan so. Ooh, don't worry about a thing. Every little thing is gonna be alright.
morning, smile with the rising sun. Three little birds, it's on my doorstep, singing sweet songs, a melody's pure and true. Singing, this is my message to you. Don't worry about a thing. Every little thing is gonna be alright. Don't worry about a thing. Every little thing is gonna be alright. Every little thing is gonna be alright. One love, one heart. Let's get together and feel alright. One love, one heart. Give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Let them all cross over, because here is love. One love, one question I'd really like to ask. One heart. Who has heard of mankind just to save his own believing? One love, one heart. Let's get together and feel alright. One love, one heart. Give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel alright. Lively up yourself, it's gonna be alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Lively up yourself, it's gonna be alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Lively up yourself, it's gonna be alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Lively up yourself, it's gonna be alright. Get together and feel
Yes, yes. Yes. Great job. Great job. Wow.
Well, at this year, we're only having one entertainment segment. But when we have an entertainment segment that's good, we only need one, right? Yes. All right, at this point in time, I would like to introduce, or invite to the stage, excuse me, Dr. Karen Dunkley. And Dr. Dunkley will be doing the introduction for our first speaker this evening. Dr. Dunkley.
Thank you so much. Greetings and salutations from the Jamaica diaspora, Northeast United States. Festive occasion. Let me, I'm here, of course, to introduce a woman who needs no introduction because those of us who believe in woman power knows Miss Lisa Hannah. However, before I introduce Ms. Hannah, allow me to welcome you, Mr. Golden. On behalf of the entire Jamaica diaspora, Northeast United States, welcome, and we're excited to have you, Mrs. Golden. Welcome to you, Ms. Hannah, and of course, Dr. Angela Brownberg, welcome to you as well. And my good friend, Ms. Delia, welcome. Thank you. Allow me also to recognize two former advisory board members. We have to honor those who came before us, as this is a volunteer position, none other than Mr. Patrick Beckford and Mr. Irwin Clay. On that note, I'm here to introduce to you Miss Lisa Hannah, a mother, a wife, a politician, senior elected member of parliament, an advocate, entrepreneur, columnist, communication specialist, and crisis manager. Lisa Hanna is a respected and courageous political incaricum, a leader in the People's National Party, formerly served as the Minister of Youth and Culture, and is currently the Shadow Minister for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Ms. Hanna, as we know, is the former Miss Jamaica World, crowned in 1993. And I always like to amplify that as one of three, a four-term elected member of parliament for the constituency of Southeast St. Anne. A humanitarian, a thought leader, and a strong Jamaican woman. Lisa grew up from humble beginnings in Jamaica. She holds both a bachelor and master's degree in communications from the University of the West Indies. And as we're here at Medgar, let me just say the University of the West Indies is a premier tertiary institution in the world. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, members of the diaspora, brothers and sisters, welcome Ms. Lisa Hanna.
Thank you, Karen. Leader of the opposition, Mark Golding MP, and Mrs. Golding, Mrs. Sandra Golding. Chairman of the People's National Party, Dr. Angela Brown Burke. General Secretary of the PNP, Dr. David Campbell. Treasurer of the PNP, Mrs. Keisha Anderson, Ms. Keisha Anderson. Co-chair of our International Commission and Diaspora Affairs Commission, Mrs. Delia Huntington, Walker Huntington, Dr. Right there? Junior Shadow Spokesperson on Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Mr. Christopher Henry. A very special good evening to you, Dr. Bramble, for being DJ, par excellence, host, convener of this event, and just troubleshooter. Bishop, thank you for the cut and clearing at the beginning. Of American politics in the tri-state area, and I would dare say in the entire North America, because she led such an extremely important change at such an extremely important time in our history. This is human flag. Officials from the university, from the college, like the Everest College, and Jamaicans, Caribbean brothers and sisters, and of course, comrades! Yeah! I want to say, before I begin my brief remarks, I want to just single out somebody because I don't know if he knows this, but it's important that he actually understands the role that he played in my life, even indirectly. He's here and he is Duncan Buchanan. Duncan Buchanan is the son of Danny Rock. When I was born into Southeast St. Anne in 2007, Comrade Portia Simpson Miller assigned Comrade Danny Buchanan to take me into Southeast St. Anne. He was the person who did. So I really owe a tremendous amount of gratitude to the Buchanan family, particularly Danny Rock, because he come and hear the proceed. So when I went into Southeast St. Anne many years ago, we started to attend church. Still attend church a lot, not as much as Dayton. But it's a church attendance. But you start out when you go to church Sunday, Saturday, or evening service, you go.
They had 9 And on this one particular Sunday morning, up in a place called Lincoln in Monique, it was raining, as I said, cats and dogs. Rain, you couldn't even walk through the raindrops. And I was scheduled to go to church that morning. Anyway, I was the only one who ended up at the church. I myself, the pastor, and a gentleman called Septimus. Septimus. We got to the church in the morning. I looked around the church, but I couldn't leave because if they hear saying leave, we're going to have a problem. So I have to stay. Got to the church, and I said, all right, let me proceed to let myself know that I know the Bible. So I started to preach from Genesis straight back to Revelation. Every Bible story I knew, I made a connection. And I saw myself to get up and start to walk to the door. So I said, myself, what happened? Stop. And he said, envy. I was just envy of what you. I'm a come. And there it is. And as I throw on one forward point, it is never been a whole lot of healing. Pull on. So the moral of the story is this. You don't have to speak long to speak strong. So I'm not going to be speaking very long until I see you. Ladies and gentlemen, we come at a time at a crossroads in our world where courage is important. And I've learned over many years that courage has no limits. It's often perceived as unreasonable. And sometimes you have to stand alone on your principles. But courage has an obligation to the generations that are coming behind us. It has an obligation to create pathways that when those generations come, they will say that you were ahead of your time. I believe strongly that Jamaica, there needs to be a renaissance in our leadership in our country. And that renaissance has to have some kind of urgent abandonment of ineffectual, tone-deaf approaches that just sprinkle our people in mediocrity and that confine them to immobile routes that don't give them alternative pathways to the visceral desire that they have to prevail. We're now celebrating 60 years, and time moves faster today than it did 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I was a minister that was responsible for Jamaica 50. What I realized, being in politics for a while, being in business for a while, and straddling different positions across those two realms, is that Jamaicans, and I would dare say young people across the region, have frustratedly tuned out to whether it is orange or green flavors of political stunt allurement, and just any kind of narrative of hope and change, especially because they have to choose between which bill to pay to have enough food to feed their families. So we all are assembled in this hall to listen, to learn, understanding that things are not that pretty out there in the United States either. Not only Jamaica, not only Trinidad, not only Antigua, not only other places. And so while I realize that courage is important and that you will stand alone on your courage, and oftentimes that is important to make a point, the truth is that we are better off standing together. We're better off standing together in numbers because as a region, we represent 8% of the world's countries. And that at a time where principal positions keep eroding what are moral obligations to take care of the masses of people We have an obligation to make our voices heard and to make sure that we impact the masses of our people with sensible decisions to propel them forward. That will take courage. It will take courageous leadership at a time in our own country where we have an undeclared civil war based on the number of murders that we experienced per 100,000. At a time where the World Health Organization looks at it, they will say that we have an epidemic in terms of the number of people that are dying. At a time where 12% of our population between the ages, male population between the ages of 18 to 30 occupy 48% of our prison system. At a time when farmers in Clarendon, St. Catherine, St. Elizabeth, who are accustomed to getting rain in May because they clear the land January, February, and March, and farmers out there know what I'm talking about. To plant in April, to get rain in May, to reap in July, we never got any rain in May. So it means that production yields are going down. And the rain count in Jamaica is going down. And this is not only unique to Jamaica. This is something that is happening globally. What is happening globally is that you are seeing the kinds of resistance, the kinds of frustration, the kinds of outward visceral anger that I believe neoliberal approaches of the 90s and globalization is now having as an impact on who we are as populations. People just can't make their ends meet. And we have to find a way as progressives to make sure that not only do we have that kind of social transformation, but that we give people and the generations, my son's generation, the Comrade Leader's son's children's generation, Davy's children's generation, Keisha's children, all of your children and grandchildren, the kind of hope that they can believe in and that it's not cliche. And that kind of hope does not come with just speeches. It comes with dedication, it comes with tremendous grit and gumption and sitting down and doing the plans and going out there on the stumps. When Dr. Angela Brownberg gets up and talks about education, she talks about it not from the perspective only of reading it in theory and doing it because she was the opposition spokesperson in education, because she lived it. She understood what it meant to get a scholarship to improve her life and have that kind of social equality.
Yes.
We have to narrow and close those gaps in healthcare. We have to close the gaps to make sure that Jamaicans and others who are so import dependent on food can have the lowest prices to eat for their own local production. So that is why it is important, and the leader will speak to you about it, for us to have that kind of regional integration where shipping costs between the region have and are low enough that we can supply each other, have the kinds of tariffs, duty-free concessions, because CSME is really not working as it should, for people to get food. My farmers in Southeast St. Anna, in a place called Douglas Castle, is the largest supplier of vegetables, pak choy, and cabbage to the Caribbean and Jamaica. The farmers now have to leave to go to find places in Clarendon because there's no water to have the kind of large-scale farming that they used to have. So we are here this evening concerned, responsible, and architects of what we would like to see the next mission of the future generation look like. Norman Manley spoke about the mission of this generation. That is why in Jamaica 50, it was the country was on a mission. 10 years later, what we have, and this is not an indictment on any particular administration, but the truth is we have not paid the kind of important attention to investing in culture that we should. Culture this year represents 5.3% of our recurring expenditure budget. That's low. And if I had to do it again, I would have had the courage to say, look, let's not spend so much on celebratory events. Let's invest in education of our culture. Let's put it in the tools we were children use. Build a performance arts high school. But what happens with courage is that you can't effectualize courage unless you train your people to understand why it is important for them to accept that kind of narrative. So had I gotten up at that time and said, look, we're going to do this and not have any celebratory events, that's what happened to resign for the 10th time. And the whole place that have my head. But the truth is, we have to ask ourselves those hard questions. And, Mark Rowling is here to speak to you as a leader of the opposition, because the opposition does have a plan about what we believe has to happen for social transformation in our country, because if we don't have that, you're going to continue to see 5 murders a day in Jamaica, 4 persons getting shot, 3 persons getting robbed, 2 persons getting raped. And if you don't want to go outside to have that, if you even stay at home, there are 3 break-ins a day in Jamaica. So we have to recalibrate and reorient with courage to take the hard decisions to move that forward. So ladies and gentlemen, we all want a Jamaica and a Caribbean that is stronger, and I don't believe that we should be minimizing the region. I think we should be strengthening it. We should be working more together. I'm happy to see when a group like this comes up here, and it has Dominica, it has Cuba, it has Grenada, it has Jamaica, it has Trinidad. That tells me that there is hope for coming together and integration. And that is just a representation. But on my business side, I find that we need more in terms of free movement of people for staff, because we have businesses in Barbados, Trinidad, and Jamaica. And we have to have the free movement of people. We can't have a situation where Jamaicans are being stopped in another Caribbean nation, or other people being suspect. We have to remove the barriers to do business in each other's countries, because we are really one set of people. I tell you, if we do speak as one voice, we will be unstoppable. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you for coming out. I know you could be doing so many other good things with your time, but I promise you, we'll be here, we'll be listening. We've been on a tremendous tour across North America, because we believe that in order to ask people to come with you on a journey, they first have to trust you to take them there. That's right. And so we ask you to trust us to take you there. Thank you so much.
Rasta out of control, try to keep us down, scatter us all around, diverse parts of the earth, open with waste away, but no matter what they do, no matter what they say, all I got to do is Harambe, Harambe, hear what I say.
So the time has come for our keynote address. I'm sorry, got some feedback here. At this point in time, we'd like to invite to the stage none other than the leader of the PNP, the opposition leader at this moment, Jamaica, none other than Mr. Mark Goldberg. Big up Dr. Bramble, who is the one who invited me to come and speak. And it's been a great pleasure and an honor to be here with you. I want to recognize again Una Clark, leader, Jamaican pioneer in the tri-state area and beyond. Respect you every time. The bishop for that powerful prayer at the beginning, set the ball rolling the right way. I want to pick up my colleagues who are here with me on the tour. You spoke so lovely, so well. Dr. Dayton Campbell, General Secretary of the National Party. Dr. Angela Brownberg, first female chairperson. This is Keisha Anderson, our treasurer, and Delia Walker Huntington, co-chair of our international diaspora, and the brain behind this tour and the coordinator of the effort. Many people put in a lot of work to make this happen, but Delia was the one who was steering the ship, so I have to figure out. Christopher Henry, leader in part of leadership of the PNP Patriots, which is our young professional and junior spokesperson for foreign affairs and foreign trade. I just want to acknowledge the folk singers before, Brata, you want them nice. Dog war, Max's Bay, all that run through my mind here. I try to remember a time when a dog fight in Max's Bay would have been something big. And a dog fight is probably Max's Bay. But that's how it goes, you know. Anyway, I am actually here to speak to you about the Caribbean diaspora's influence on the United States of America. And it's time that we speak on that theme because, as you know, Jamaica is celebrating 60 years of independence. But here we are in the US of A, and we are addressing members of the diaspora. And the influence of the Caribbean diaspora is significant. So I want to touch on that theme in this lecture tonight. I also want to recognize the members of faculty, staff, administrators of Medgar Evers College of the City University of New York, or as we would say in Jamaica, big up to the Cougars in the house. It is indeed a distinct pleasure to participate in the Caribbean Research Center's speaker series.
I must thank Dr. Ken Irish Bramble, who is the Executive Director of the Caribbean Research Center, for extending an invitation to contribute in this prestigious speaker series. I must admit, there is certainly a special excitement about engaging with you in New York City, in Brooklyn, no less, the birthplace of the great Jamaican notorious B.I.G.
Yes. Yes.
New York, where arguably the greatest concentration of Caribbean people residing outside of the Caribbean region live and work and have raised generations of proud Caribbean American children. To grasp this, one only has to recall the vibrant images of the annual Labor Day parade, or on a more granular scale, one only has to go out into one of the myriads of small business establishments that have been built by Caribbean entrepreneurs over decades, ensuring that a piece of the Caribbean is always available here in the US of A. So whether it is a patty, whether it is rice and peas, sauce, jerk chicken, cornmeal porridge, even in the dead of winter here in New York, one can feel the centrality, the importance, and the impact of the Caribbean and Caribbean people on this place. The powerful vibe of our culture, of our way of life, is well represented here in all its glory in New York City. So to deliver this lecture this evening is a distinct honor and privilege. That said, and in spite of the references I've just made, I wish to begin with a strong assertion that the impact of the Caribbean on the United States of America is not limited to festivals and food. Too often, these are the predominant and limited images of who we are and where and how we have contributed, without adequate expression of the seriousness, the scope, and capacity of Caribbean people's social, political, cultural, and historic engagement in this country. And I must begin with the historical foundation of the Caribbean diaspora, which was actually during the 17th century, when enslaved Africans were brought from Barbados by slave owners to work in South Carolina. We must recall, and that's the first, as I understand, the first Caribbean people to come to the US of A. We must recall that until 1776, much of the Caribbean, then the British West Indies, what is now America, were all British colonies. Bound together not by sharing contiguous lands, but by law, by culture, the brutal realities of the transatlantic slave trade, and the courageous acts of resistance through which our enslaved foreparents, these lands, fought to secure liberation. During the 18th century, the majority of enslaved persons in the northern states were transported from the Caribbean, outnumbering those brought directly from Africa. Up to 20% of enslaved persons in South Carolina were from the Caribbean. Along with South Carolina, Virginia, and New York, a large Caribbean community expanded in Boston. By 1860, just before the Civil War, it is estimated that one of five Bostonians were born in the Caribbean. So when we talk about the important role of Boston in the anti-slavery movement, we must account for the presence of Black people from the Caribbean who played an important role in the struggle alongside US-born activists. And indeed, Boston became a hub of both the national and international anti-slavery movement and commemorated each year the anniversary of emancipation in the British West Indies on the 1st of August, 1834, even while fighting for enslaved persons still laboring in bondage in the states south of the Mason-Dixon line. So the influence of the Caribbean in the United States goes way back and is very profound. And of course, we must acknowledge the tremendous significance of the War of Liberation and Independence waged by the enslaved people of Haiti against France and its Western allies from 1791, led by the brilliant military strategist and freedom fighter Toussaint Louverture. As a man from Jamaica, I have to acknowledge Dr. Woodman.
Yes.
And say was the man who really kicked it off over here. The success of their struggle led to Haiti becoming the first Black republic in the Western Hemisphere, established as a sovereign state in 1805, and the first nation in the world to constitutionally guarantee the freedom of all people, regardless of race. Haiti was the first of the impact of this momentous achievement by Haiti and the freedoms eventually attained in the rest of the Caribbean and in the United States cannot be overstated. After the American Civil War, the foreign-born Black population in the US grew from some 4,000 to over 20,000 persons. Around the turn of the 20th century, with many thousands moving from the Caribbean to the northern cities of the United States, joining with their African American brothers and sisters who were fleeing the South during the Great Migration, they were not met with open arms. No. And in the bleak summer of 1919, anti-Black violence surged in cities across the US against the influx of migrants, both from the South and from the Caribbean. So all of that struggle involved us in the United States as well. Called the Red Summer because of the blood that flowed in the northern city streets. The great poet from Jamaica, Claude McKay, then living and writing here in New York, penned the iconic poem, If We Must Die, in homage to the bloodshed in that red summer of 1919. Many of you will be familiar with that inspirational poem. We recited it in school as little children in Jamaica. And no doubt many of you did so too, whether you went to school in Kingston or in Jamaica, Queens. So my friends, the history of this country is deeply entwined with and cannot be extricated from the history of the people of the Caribbean. While the flow of immigrants from the Caribbean to the US was tightened in the mid-1920s, after the passage of the Immigration Act of 1924, the Ellis Island Museum displays the names of countless Caribbean nationals who sailed into New York Harbor and saw Lady Liberty welcoming them to America. Of course, the America they would encounter on arrival was not always the one that they had imagined. It was during that period that a man from the Caribbean, from Jamaica in fact, would migrate to the US in 1916 with the powerful intellect and steely determination to create what became the largest and most powerful transnational Black organization in history, the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, the UNIACL. That man was, of course, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, Jamaica's first national hero. In 1920, Garvey and the UNIA held a delegates conference in Harlem that was attended by more than 25,000 persons from across the world. We should never understate, and it is important that we, as the Rasta elders would say, seek to overstand the deep and abiding impact of Garvey, the UNIA, and the social, political, cultural, and economic vision of Garveyism, not just on the Caribbean and African diaspora, but on the United States of America. Between 1941, during the World War II, as it's called, and 1950, some 50,000 Caribbean nationals migrated to the US. Several originally came here as farm workers, working on sugar and tobacco plantations in Florida and other states. But over time, they left the farms to relocate in cities like New York and Boston, as they found ways to change their status from farm workers to landed immigrants who could remain legally in this country. Having achieved this legal status, many of them brought their relatives from the Caribbean to join them in the diaspora under the American immigration concept of family reunification. Most of these immigrants from Jamaica and other Caribbean nations did not come to America only to benefit themselves. They were determined to integrate into the communities where they settled, like here in New York, and they were determined to make significant contributions to their newly adopted home. These early members of the Caribbean diaspora included people like Carlos Juan Finlay from Cuba, who, having determined that mosquitoes were the cause of yellow fever, helped to eradicate the disease in the US. A Cuban helped to eradicate the disease of yellow fever in the US. Many of the famous writers and artists during the 1920s Harlem Renaissance were either born in the Caribbean or of Caribbean descent, many of them. Some great examples include Nella Larson, who published several novels, including Passing, which was recently adapted to a film some of you may have seen. She was of paternal Caribbean parentage. Her father was from what is now known as Suriname. Arthur Schomburg, after whom the famous Schomburg Library in Harlem is named, who migrated to this city from Puerto Rico. Cicely Tyson, the outstanding stage and screen actress, who was born in Harlem in 1933 as a daughter of immigrants from Nevis. Hazel Scott, the African-American classical and jazz pianist, who was an immigrant from Trinidad and Tobago and was raised in New York City from the age of 4, and later became the wife of legendary Black US Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr. And of course, Malcolm Little, later known as Malcolm X, who was the son of a Grenadian mother and a father who was a self-declared guardian. Malcolm himself, there you go. Malcolm himself expressed that he was influenced by Garvey's values of Black pride and self-reliance taught to him by his father. The US tightened its immigration laws again in the 1950s, introducing a rigid quota system. But in 1965, President Lyndon Johnson's administration passed a new Immigration Act, which liberalized immigration to the United States and resulted in a resurgence of Caribbean migration here. It is estimated that approximately 1 million Caribbean immigrants came to America between the 1970s and the early 1990s, nearly half of them from Jamaica, and the vast majority settling in this tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. While history may not highlight the achievements of many of these early migrants, they place significant emphasis on education. Amen. And most importantly, they ensured that their offspring, born and raised in the US, were imbued with strong values, positive self-belief, the spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship, and a sense of civic responsibility and community engagement. Those early 20th century Caribbean migrants have thereby left an indelible imprint on this American society, and they are honored by the outstanding achievements of so many of their descendants. And among the notable figures from that second generation are Minister Louis Farrakhan, who was born in New York in 1933 to Sarah May Manning, an immigrant from St. Kitts, Nevis. Harry Belafonte, also born in New York City right here, whose father was Harold George Belafonte Sr., a Jamaican chef. Wow. J. Bruce Llewellyn, a businessman who was chairman, CEO, and a part owner of the Coca-Cola bottling company, and also a founding member of the 100 Black Men of America. He was born in Harlem to a Jamaican mother and a Guyanese father. General Colin Powell. We say Colin, but a Colin is Colin. Former chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff and U.S. Secretary of State, who was born in Harlem to Jamaican immigrants from the parish of St. Elizabeth. And of course, U.S. Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, a legendary colossus of American politics. She was born in Brooklyn to parents who were Guyanese and Barbadian immigrants. Shirley Chisholm served on the New York General Assembly prior to her election to the U.S. Congress in 1964. She holds the historic distinction of being the first Black woman to serve in the U.S. Congress, and also the first woman and the first Black woman to run for the presidency of the United States. I note here with admiration that last year, here at Medgar Evers College, you hosted your 9th annual Shirley Chisholm Conference, focusing on women's empowerment. Big up, Medgar Evers. Friends, I want to pause for a minute and take us back a little to the beginning of this talk and then move us forward. I want to consider together for a moment this concept of diaspora. And I'm not focusing on the dictionary meaning of the word, because that's deeper thing than the mere meaning of the word in the dictionary. When you check a stop, as we say in Jamaica, it is like when we talk about where our neighbors spring from. For Caribbean peoples, whether in the 18th century or in this 21st century, whether first generation, second, or beyond, no matter where we go, our neighbors spring cut in the Caribbean, and more specifically, in our countries, either of origin or birth or cultural claiming. And that is why you find that wherever we go, we carry literally our symbolic umbilical cord with us. And it's these cords that transcend time and space. It is these cords of deep connection that allow us to come together in community as a Caribbean diaspora. And I just want to echo what Lisa said about Brata, singing largely Jamaican folk music in Jamaican patois. What? A Grenadian, a Trini, a Cuban, Dominican, and you know, one Jamaican or two Jamaican. One say from Ghana, with some Jamaican. Yeah, so you see the melting pot and the synergy and the cultural claiming right there. During the 1970s, the Caribbean diaspora in the US grew exponentially, with significant numbers of our people again pouring into the New York region, and a new trend emerging of settlement now in South Florida. Like their predecessors that cemented a strong Caribbean diaspora in the early to mid 20th century, the migrants who came to the US in the later years of the century were ambitious, determined to make a success of their life, and driven by positive ambition. They did not shy away from instilling their culture on the American society, creating a new Caribbean American culture that is so richly exemplified in music, dance forms, theater, cuisine, and overall achievement. Today, across America, the phenomenal beats of reggae and dancehall music are everywhere. The impact of artists like DJ Kool Herc, on the birth and flourishing of hip hop here in New York cannot be overstated. Reggaeton is another genre that is directly influenced by music from Jamaica, the Caribbean. Soca from Trinidad and Tobago, Compass from Haiti have also had strong influence on the US culture. And then there are the name brand artists from the Caribbean, such as Sean Paul and Shaggy from Jamaica, Nicki Minaj from Trinidad, Rihanna from Barbados, who have dominated American and indeed global popular culture in the last 2 decades. And before they emerged, Robert Nesta Marley, Bob Marley, had moved beyond being a musical legend, having transcended into a timeless icon of the struggle for social justice and resistance to oppression in whatever form and from whatever source. And I have to big up Bob Marley, and to big up all the wailers coming out of Trenchtown and the MP. Why did you say that? Everything in attention. As strong as the influence of Jamaican music is in the US, this influence is rivaled by the influence of Jamaican food. Take the Jamaican patty. In the 1970s and 1980s, when the influence of Jamaicans to the US really peaked, it wasn't easy to find a Jamaican patty shop then. Today, the Jamaican patty is a popular and pervasive food item in the US, found in large supermarket chains. Several schools now serve our patties for lunch to students across America. This is what a poem about Jamaica colonized England in reverse. Look like we're doing it for America too. And I could not stand before you here in New York and not pay tribute to and attribute significant contribution to the global reach of the Jamaican patty to one of the most successful Jamaican businesses in New York, Golden Cross. The operators of this fast-growing US franchise have indeed helped to crown the Jamaican patty here in Jamaica, and of course it expanded beyond patties. And we had the pleasure of hanging out in Atlanta on this tour with Jackie Hawthorne, one of the founders from the family that built Golden Cross. But in addition to the patty, Americans are eating more varieties of Jamaican food than ever. In American restaurants, it has become common to see jerk this and jerk that on the menu. The ultimate Jamaican delicacy of oxtail and beans, that was once regarded as low on the social ladder. It's now in such high demand across the US that it's more expensive than steak and chicken. And has found its way onto many a Michelin star. It is amusing to learn Americans who couldn't tolerate spicy food now happily consuming the popular Jamaican curry goat and curry chicken, and also a wide range of delicious rotis from Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana. Thanks to the influence of Jamaican and other Caribbean food in New York and other parts of the US, a vibrant market has developed in the US for Jamaican and other Caribbean produce, spices, juices, boosting local business communities and our exports from the region. So you are helping to develop our countries back home by changing tastes and developing tastes here in the US. As I said earlier, as important and amazing as these things are, we are not only festival and food, bacchanal and would-be, dancehall and dumpling. The influence of the wave of Caribbean Americans in the second half of the 20th century expanded significantly into the fields of business and politics. Thriving Caribbean business communities emerged in New York, Florida, Georgia in particular. A successful Caribbean media industry also blossomed, mainly in New York and South Florida, where high concentrations of Caribbean Americans reside and continues today, primarily in the form of free-to-air and online broadcasting. So we're making our impact felt in broadcast media. As the numbers of Caribbean immigrants increased and the first generation of Caribbean Americans came of age, more Caribbean Americans entered the American political arena. Notably among these political pioneers are our beloved Una Clark and her esteemed daughter, esteemed daughter, Yvette Clark, in New York. Served on the New York City Assembly, while Congresswoman Yvette Clark represents the 9th Congressional District in New York. Given the foregoing, it is not surprising that the Caribbean community is now a sought-after voting bloc in American politics. This was particularly evident in the 2020 U.S. general election, with a first-generation American, Kamala Harris, daughter of Jamaican economist Professor Donald Harris, appearing on the presidential ticket and going on to be sworn in as the first female vice president of the United States. President, we've had a Secretary of State, and you know that the presidency must come soon.
Here.
Happily, while the Caribbean diaspora succeeded in building a strong community in the U.S., most also maintain a strong connection with their homeland in the Caribbean. As I said before, the navel string, the umbilical cord, though geographically cut, is never culturally, psychologically, or spiritually severed. Despite all this, the Caribbean diaspora is too often primarily seen as making a significant contribution to the Caribbean through financial remittances. It is true that even as Jamaica proudly celebrates our 60th year of political independence on the 6th of August of this year, our nation continues to be dependent on the vast input from our diaspora. The importance of remittances to the Caribbean is reflected in the economic data. According to Jamaica Information Service, JIS, remittances from the diaspora to Jamaica reportedly reached $3.3 billion US in 2021. 3.3 billion. Representing an increase over the 2.9 billion US sent in 2020. And of course, these remittances are a vital source of Jamaica's foreign exchange earnings. And in addition to the technical balance of payments impact, Caribbean economies are more buoyant because of remittances. And most importantly, many Caribbean families are sustained by remittances. But there is much more to what the diaspora members contribute to the Caribbean than the money that they send home, as vast as that is. Much more needs to be done to leverage the vast potential that resides in the experience, qualifications, and other capacities of the Caribbean diaspora members in contributing to national development in Jamaica and other Caribbean countries. I therefore want to stress to you this evening, ladies and gentlemen, comrades all, that the input of the Caribbean diaspora far exceeds foreign exchange. The Caribbean and my country, Jamaica, also need your skills and your talents to help us to tackle our fundamental developmental challenges. Modalities for your engagement and participation in our national life need to be further developed. And I am committed to assisting in that process. And indeed, this tour is an initiative designed to make us more effective in trying to make that happen and facilitate.
Who wants to vote in the next election? Yes. I want to vote in the next election. Yes.
Modern technology has greatly enhanced the possibilities for broader and deeper diaspora engagement. Modern technology. So what is needed now is political will and consistency of effort. And as we seek to harness your spirit and capabilities, we must also acknowledge and celebrate all that has made you such an indomitable force here in this United States. We recognize the sacrifices that it takes for a person to pack up and leave home, sometimes for the very first time, to leave family, friends, and all that they've known for their entire life, and enter the unknown that is Paris. Stepping into a new culture, and for some, a new language. Stepping into a new geography, literally and symbolically. I recognize what it means to navigate complex and challenging systems, government, politics, in transportation. I don't envy anyone who comes from the Caribbean for the first time to New York and has to learn the subway system and do so in winter. So respect you. Respect you. But our people have done all this and done it without any fuss. They've just got on with it. I know that Caribbean immigrants often have to sort out their immigration status and settle themselves personally before they can become active in community life. We know that many yearn for their families left behind in the Caribbean and work tirelessly towards reunification with their loved ones. I'm also keenly aware that many millions of undocumented persons in America are Caribbean people, and that this separation can lead to the breakdown of families and deep anguish when persons are faced with the reality of being unable to return home to visit a sick loved one or to say goodbye at a funeral. But despite the uphill climb as immigrants to America, Caribbean people have tremendously influenced and indeed altered in positive ways the diversity, complexity, and characteristics of the American body politic. We are proud of the impact you have made and will continue to have on so many aspects of American life. Those of us home in the Caribbean embrace and feel empowered by your accomplishments, despite the struggle of adjustment and integration. When one of you achieves greatness, your entire Caribbean family celebrates with you. We in the Caribbean continue to experience challenges when it comes to infrastructure, education, healthcare, domestic and transnational crime, the impact of climate change, access to investment for funding, and recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, among other issues. But we are a resilient people. While Jamaica, at 60, has seen advances in many areas of social and economic life, and enjoys strong democratic governance, irrespective of which political party has formed the government since 1962. The resilient and resourceful spirit of our people remains our number one asset. And members of the diaspora, you are our number one ambassadors. I know that members of the Caribbean diaspora wear your pride for your home countries on your sleeve, no matter where in the diaspora you reside and what spaces you occupy. Vice President Kamala Harris was reported to have said in a national interview before she became vice president that she has juicy beef patties in her refrigerator. The plethora of Caribbean American organizations that exist in the diaspora are a testament to the commitment that members of the Caribbean diaspora have for their homelands. From alumni associations to professional associations, to groups of friends who get together to form partner and pool their resources to support their countries, that support is invaluable. Know that the members of the diaspora are part and parcel of the Caribbean community, and we are one family wherever we reside. Jamaica and the other islands of the Caribbean are not limited by geography. As I've said, it's an umbilical cord that connects us all. In closing, I want to acknowledge the milestone of Jamaica's 60th jubilee and the pride all Jamaicans feel in the country's attainment of 60 years of independence. Of course, as far as nations go, Jamaica is still a youth. There is much work to be done as the country moves ahead. And as we look towards the future, from the depths of my heart, I want to thank Jamaicans overseas for your unwavering support of the land of your birth and encourage you to continue to have our back. I thank the diaspora for all the work you have done over these 60 years in helping the various areas of development in Jamaica. Your efforts are well appreciated, and the people of Jamaica thank you, even if we don't always show it as much as they should. We look forward to the continued engagement of the diaspora and cementing even greater linkages as we move forward. So thank you for coming out tonight. And God bless.
closing, I would like for those thoughtful remarks. Likewise, to Shanna for her comments. Contributions this evening. I do apologize for the technical issues that we seem to have had midway. That was happening for, one guy is trying to run the whole restaurant. We're bound to break the plate here. So, please bear with me and forgive me for that. Thank you for that. All right. At this time, I'd actually like to invite you to join us once again on stage. And I'd also like to invite Bishop Gonzalez, thank you, and Mr. Ray Allen. Yes, I'm going to Mr. Ray Allen of the CRC Advisory Board to also join us. And where I come from the tiny island called Montserrat, it's rude to invite people over and not offer them some kind of token of appreciation. And so this evening we'd like to present to you the CRC Speaker Award in recognition of your wonderful presentation this evening. And in addition, we also have to offer you a souvenir, right? You can't come to Medgar and walk away. All right, so all right, yeah, we're generous around here. I remember we want that because there's another presentation, but we will allow you to take pictures here. You tell us where you want us. Can you come across? No, stay for yeah, there we go. All right, you can look at us. Okay. Everybody look over there. But don't worry, it's gonna be a second round. The whole time, guys, you're gonna get that. Over here. Can I please invite Mr. Golding to join us as well? Yeah. Yeah, I'll follow up. Mr. Golding. You sit behind every great man. Can't have any t-shirts and you don't have. Guys, someone close. And that was the person who remembered me, right? Remember I gave you one. All right. All right. One more. So, Ms. Hannah, please, if you would join us.
Gonna work your heart.
I would want to shake your hands, but your hand is full. There we go. Even better. All right. Everybody together. Everybody together. Everybody together. Everybody together for the photo op. There you go.
Everybody, one step back, please. One step back. One step back. Everybody, one step back.
Oh, I think we're very good. All right.
Here we go. Yeah, hold it up.
Yeah.
Good. You gotta get it back. Okay, good. Somebody over here. Over here. In terms of presentation, yes, we decided. One of the delegation. Please allow me to get the closing remarks. Okay, please allow me to just get the closing remarks, and then we'll bring all of them up for the committee. This time I'd like to invite to the stage to make the vote of thanks Ms. Dahlia Walker Huntington, who is co-chair of the International Diaspora Affairs Committee, Commission, excuse me.
Hey, everyone. Dr. Bramble, I want to first thank you for being such an integral part of this leg of the diaspora tour. You have worked tirelessly, not just as a host, but as a coordinator of the evening, and I want to thank you very much. Organizing committee of the leader of the opposition's visit to the United States, the New York tri-state area. I want to thank you also for all of your work and contribution to this leg of the tour. But in particular, their co-chairs, Patrick Beckford and Tamar Newman. Who I'm sure Dr. Bramble thought was a staff member, the amount of times that she was here. Not true, Dr.
In fact, I was offering to hire her. I don't have any money.
So before I go on to thank some more, I want to address a comment that was made by a couple of people. I don't know if they're still here, but they shouted out that they wanted to vote in the next election in Jamaica. Let me explain to you why that's not feasible and why it cannot happen right now. First of all, we would need a change in the constitution of Jamaica to allow persons overseas. It would need a referendum. And we've never had a referendum passed in Jamaica. But besides that, the logistics of voting in Jamaica, we vote in Jamaica by constituency. So if you live overseas, where would your constituency be? Number two, there is no voting without taxation. You know, they fought a revolutionary war here. There's no representation, taxation without representation. What's the other way around? For countries whose nationals overseas vote, they pay taxes in their country. So if you're willing to pay taxes back in Jamaica, then you can start discussing it. Additionally, there's a double taxation treaty with the United States that does not allow for taxes to be paid in both places. So it's an emotional attachment that we have to Jamaica, where we want to participate in the politics of the country. But the fact of the matter remains that in order for this to happen, a lot of changes would need to happen, possibly not in our lifetimes. But as a substitute, the People's National Party does support changes that would
involve greater representation. One of those that the party supports is the appointment of members of the diaspora to statutory boards in Jamaica, where the expertise from Jamaicans living overseas can be contributed to the country without direct voting. The party also supports the appointment of senators, members of the Senate, by both parties. So the JLP would have a senator from the diaspora and the PNP would have one from the diaspora. That is probably a little easier to sell to the Jamaican people, because we over here want one thing, those who live in Jamaica want something else. Remember also that a number of Jamaicans living overseas have the potential to change the outcome of an election if we had one person, one vote, without having to live there to deal with the consequences. So all of these things must be taken into consideration when we make the emotional plea that we want to vote in Jamaica. We understand. So let me go back to what I was asked to do, which is to give some closing remarks. Unlike members of the delegation with whom I've traveled across the United States these past more than a week, I live in the diaspora. I live in Florida. I've lived here since 1979. I came here after high school, and yes, I'm only 29, so do math. But I've lived here, so I've lived your lives. I know what it is to leave everything that is Jamaica behind. I came here when I was 18, and I did think I was leaving everything of Jamaica behind. Remember in those days when I came here to make a phone call to Jamaica, you had to call the operator and ask for a person-to-person call. You could pick up the phone and dial directly. And the cost of a phone call was a fortune. So we used to write letters. You remember those airmail things that we used to write and fold over? We used to write letters back to our friends and family in Jamaica. So I understand the passion that you have as members of the diaspora living in America. I understand the struggles. I understand working more than one job. I understand going to school and working. I understand sleeping in my car in between classes because I'm so exhausted and I've left work and I need to go to school. So I understand the struggle, and I also understand the passion that you have for Jamaica and the Caribbean, wherever you're from. And so I want to thank the organizers of tonight's evening of the presentation. Particularly want to thank Rod. I've never heard an ode to Yam before. Never quite heard it that way. But it did evoke some memories, and I really want to thank the organizers for putting together this last leg of the diaspora tour that saw us starting off in South Florida, Atlanta, Maryland, DC, and New York, tri-state, where arguably the largest concentration of Caribbean people reside outside of the region.
That's the lie.
And I want to say, when I grow up, I want to be like Miss Una. I want her spirit. I admire you and have for years. You are indeed our hero. We look up to you all across the United States. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for hosting the Leader of the Opposition. Thank you for listening to the lecture. I hope you heard and learned some things about our people, our resilience, and our contribution to this country. Because without America, without immigrants, there is no America. And unless you were born on a reservation, unless you're a Miccosukee, an Apache, your parents and forefathers came from somewhere else to be in this country. We are a country of immigrants, and you sit at the epicenter of the immigrant population in America, in the Northeast. And we thank you for welcoming us. Thank you to the Warrens and all of you who welcomed us so warmly to this last leg of the diaspora tour. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Bramble, but know that no event in the Caribbean is complete without a party. So them have session tonight after this, so hang around if you don't know where it is, and you will be advised. And come on out and party with the leader of the opposition. You saw his moves up here earlier. So come out and enjoy. And thank you once again for your warm welcome to the delegation. Thank you.
All right, and with that, we bring this evening's meeting to a close. I want to again thank all of you for coming out and enjoying this one. Thanks, behind the scenes people, Derek, Roger, thank you very much for the service. I know they ended at 5 o'clock, and you're still here. For your support and for you more, I appreciate it. I appreciate you very much. Special shout out to this session, which is the reason I'm coming right now. Thank you, Dr. Webster, and also for your support. All right, and with that, we bring this session to an end. Thank you again for coming, and have a good night.